Hello, my name is Jim Beebe, and I'm going to be your presenter for this video. We have taken a few liberties with some of the standard safety rules for the purposes of this video only, and we encourage you to take care and work safely. Segmented turning is not difficult. It is, however, somewhat time-consuming. It's also far less expensive than laminating several boards together. Normally, you would cut segments from dry, processed woods, and thus movement and shrinking does not become an issue. It's also a way to make patterns in designing your vessel by using different colors of wood together. It's actually a very satisfying method of wood turning. This first video will take you through the design and planning phase, and then into the cutting and joining phase. Remember that we will be showing you many standard ways of doing things, and some ways that we have discovered on our own over time. You might even develop some new ideas of your own. And remember, stave construction is a form of segmentation as well. We're excited to share with you one of our favorite aspects of wood turning, and hope that you will discover some things to help you expand your knowledge and your skills in wood turning. The design of a vessel, drawing to scale, deciding on the wood to use, calculating segment lengths, and making a table of all the information required to make the rings required to build your vessel is where we're going to start. So choosing a design for your project is fairly simple. Look through books and on the internet for ideas, or just design your own project. There are no wrong designs. The same applies to choosing your wood. It's entirely a personal preference. Once you've decided what you're going to build, a bowl, a vase, any other type of vessel, the first step will be to make a scaled drawing. If the diameter and the height of your vessel will fit on your graph paper, then the drawing should be made full scale. The use of 11-inch by 17-inch graph paper is the best. When your drawing is complete, you need to decide on the number of segments you will use in each row. This is also a personal decision. Once the drawing is complete, you should highlight the horizontal lines to better define the thickness or layer of each ring. The vertical rings in any given row are marked just outside of the widest vessel shape line and just inside the narrowest part of the vessel shape. This is just to allow a little extra room to turn the shape as you designed it, and allow for any misalignment in the gluing process which moves a row off of center alignment. Most often, ring thickness is maintained throughout the entire vessel unless a feature ring is added at a different thickness. We will not be addressing making feature rings in this video. The next step is to calculate the length of the segments on each row. It is easiest and best to make a table of all the information needed before proceeding to calculating the length of the segments on each row. To assist in calculating the segment lengths, most books include a set of tables showing segment lengths for 8, 12, 18, 20, and 24 segments in a row for diameters from 3 inches to 12 inches. For the purposes of this video, we will use a maximum diameter of 8 inches on a bowl, a solid base for the bottom row, 5 segmented rows, and 12 segments per row. To determine the angle of each segment, divide the number of segments into 360 degrees. For example, 360 divided by the 12 segments per row that we're going to use equals 30 degrees. Then divide that 30 degrees by 2 for the segment cutting angle. Before you can start cutting segments, you will need to make a wedgie sled, a table saw blade insert for zero clearance, a safety ramp strip to prevent segment kickback, and an adjustable stop for setting the required distance between the blade and the stop. Plans for all of these are available at segeasy.com. You are now almost ready to start setting up your wedge sled and begin cutting your first set of wedges for your first ring. Normally, the bottom ring is made of a solid piece of wood, not segments. This is done so that the bottom row is perfectly flat to start gluing the rows on. You will need first to calculate the length required for strips of the same width and color for cutting segments. We will use a diameter of 8 inches for our bowl and a width of segment as 0.5 inches as an example. The length of each segment works out to be 2.125 or 2 1/8 inches. This means you will need a strip of walnut and a strip of maple, 2 1/8 inches times 6 segments equaling 12 3/4 inches. You will then need to add an extra 3 inches to allow for saw blade thickness and enough material to hold the board safely against the fence when cutting. If you turn your board over each time a cut is made, a lesser length of board will be required. Here is a drawing to show you what happens. This procedure must be done for each row and recorded on your table. Most people make 1 or 2 extra segments just in case, so the strip will need to be extended by that additional distance for a total of 20.25 inches approximately. If you are using a sled with 2 fences, you must set each fence at the same angle from a center line on the sled base. Next, take each length of material you have cut to size and mark a wiggly line on the top of the strip. It is also best to run a line along the edge of the strip that will be held against the fence or fences. When the segment length is set, place your board against the fence of your sled. Move it so that you slide it forward into the blade and it will cut the first end of the first segment. The excess from the cut should fall down from the blade insert ramp and can safely be moved out of the way. The next step is to move your board so that the now angled end touches the saw stop. You will then cut the first segment of that ring. Stop the saw and remove the first segment and measure it with a digital sliding caliper. If it is the exact length required, proceed with cutting the number of segments of that length for that ring. If the measurement is not correct, it will have to be adjusted and another cut made. When it is the exact measurement required, you may proceed to cut the number of segments required. This procedure is followed for every row. If you have more than one row with segments of the same length, regardless of the width of the segments, all of the segments of those rows should be cut at the same length setting. It is a good idea to place the segmented pieces of each ring in a plastic bag and label it with the row number for ease of access and avoiding mixing segments of different sizes. You only need to change the segment length from blade to the stop for rows with different segment lengths, regardless of their width. Each segment needs to be sanded to remove burrs from the sawing procedure. Once all the segments of a row are sanded, they can be organized for gluing. Multiple wood colors should be separated for easy access. Starting with the first ring, you place the segments together without glue to form a circle and apply an elastic band or a hose clamp to hold them together. Hold the assembly toward some light and look for light showing in the joints. If they are all tight and no light appears, they should be ready for gluing. If there is light showing, it means there are minor errors in the segment cutting and you should plan to use the half ring method of gluing segments together. For the half ring method of gluing, place a piece of waxed paper on your work surface, glue the first half of the ring segments together and rub their surfaces to make good contact. Immediately glue the second half of that ring together. Have two short pieces of 1/2-inch dowel ready and place them where the two halves of the ring will be tightened with a hose or band clamp. The clamp tightens the segments together, and after the glue dries, take the clamp off and remove the two dowels. If you have a large enough disc sander, straighten the edges of each half ring until they fit perfectly. Very little material is removed and it will not affect the turning of the vessel. Now glue and clamp the two halves together. Once that glue has dried, remove the clamp and use the disc sander to flatten one side of the ring until it is perfectly flat. Follow this procedure with each ring and mark the number of the ring on its edge. For gluing the rows together, once the segments have been glued together, fasten a faceplate to a glue block and turn the block until it is perfectly flat. Next, glue on the solid bottom row to the glue block using the tailstock to center and clamp them together. Bottom layer has now been flattened and we're ready to glue on row number 2. We've drawn a line through the center so they're on each side opposite each other, and a vertical line down here on each side so that we can line it up with the other segmented rings to create a spiral effect. This is row number 2, one of the reasons you put that on there. And you can see that we have put a circle around here, which is centered on this piece and this piece, so that they line up perfectly. So we'll put them on. Move that over till it's lined up. Now those 2 layers are now centered on each other. This is my sanding disc, and I use it for doing my clamping on the lathe. I took the temporary clamps off, and now I'm moving this up into position. I lock it, and now I tighten it. Now, row 2 is permanently glued to the bottom layer. We're now going to prepare for gluing on the 3rd row, and that means that we will have to take the pressure off. And this has been gluing now for about 35 minutes, and it is holding very well. So I'm going to remove the tailstock. Okay, the next step will be to flatten this surface so it can be glued to the next layer, which already has one good flat surface. Now we'll stop and put the straight edge on. Well, I would say that we're doing pretty darn fine. No light showing through. So we're ready to put the next layer on. Okay, I'm going to place this portion that's done and put it on top of this one. What I want to do is have the center of this wedge at the joint between the light and the dark wood here. So I move it over there, and the marks that are already on here get lined up on the other side as well. And we just take our fingers and we touch there, we touch there, everything is good, lined up. X here and an X here. Take them off. And that's where they'll fit together. So now it's just a matter of putting the glue on and putting them together and back on the lathe with the pressure from the tailstock. And now we're set to put it back on the lathe. And we take ring 3. And we have our line across here and down the edges on both sides. So we put this down. This moves over so that it's lined up on this edge. And move around. Now we'll just let that sit for a couple of minutes, and then we can put the pressure on. And we have 3 rows. Half of the bowl is now complete. All the hard work is done now, and we're getting ready to turn the outside first. I use the safety helmet, and then we'll go to the inside turning afterwards. I have added a little support by putting the tailstock and holding it up at the bottom on the inside. Just a little bit of extra support. Yeah, I just got some up here. Okay, we've pretty much finished the turning on the outside, and I'll be moving on to turning the inside next, and following that will be the sanding. And we're now ready to start turning the inside, and I've put on a bowl steady so that it supports it when you're putting force on the inside. We're getting close. We have finished the turning, and we're now ready to start sanding. So I've hooked up my dust collector on here, this little homemade jig, and it seems to work fairly well. So we're going to start that right now. Okay, we finished the inside, and now I'm going to turn to the outside. So now that we've finished the sanding, we've put the bowl itself on the jumbo jaws and tightened those down, moved the tailstock up to provide a little bit of support, and we're going to begin taking off the sacrificial piece in here. The last step is to saw the nubbin off. We haven't gone all the way through, so we'll saw that off. Now that that's gone, we can work on the face and finish the bottom with a concave shape. Now we have finished all turning and sanding. It is time to pick and apply a finish of your choice. I chose to use wipe-on poly for this demonstration.